So when I was around, I would say 12, I had glandular fever, and it was quite bad, and it lasted quite long. And after I recovered, a lot of some of the symptoms kind of lingered on. We went to quite a few different doctors and did different blood tests, but the results were always good, and I was always told that I was healthy. So over the years, I sort of normalized some of those symptoms because I just started thinking that's just something which everyone feels. But now that I've recovered fully, I know that it's actually not the way it is. I did triathlons for many years, and by this point, by 2014, I had decided to mostly focus on running and some swimming. I was just keeping busy and enjoying life. And then suddenly in 2015, I'm not really sure what the tipping point was, but suddenly I just developed very severe, seemed like gastric flu in the beginning, but then it just went on for months and it just became chronic. Sometimes I would throw up 10 times, up to even 20 times a day. And obviously at this point, and I had other related gut issues as well. So obviously at this point we went to a lot of different specialists and did a lot of tests and blood tests and gastroscopy and ultrasound. And the answer was always, there's nothing to explain why you have those symptoms. A couple of foods which seemed to make things worse. So there began the long process of eliminating foods. And I joined some support groups for people with similar food intolerances and so on. And from what I was reading, I was, I learned to go around with lists of things that I needed to avoid in order to avoid the first thing that I thought was the problem food, which was corn. And I just used to go around and just check every single thing that I was eating. I just kept eliminating more and more foods, and I wasn't improving. I mean, actually, my reactions were getting worse, and I was reacting to more and more foods. So that by the time, around 6 months later, I was down to just 8 foods. So by September of 2015, I could just eat 8 different fruits and vegetables. And on the one hand, I just thought, okay, this is going to be my life, and I just need to accept it and just learn to live with it the best way possible. But at the same time, I used to think, how can it be that, a year ago I was an athlete, I was enjoying my life, I had just got married, and suddenly, just more or less, it was just over a year after I had got married, I had reached a point where I was so tired all the time that I could barely function, I couldn't enjoy food anymore. I had developed a lot of anxiety, so that sometimes even just looking at food would make me feel really anxious, because I was always wondering whether it was going to make me ill and what was going to happen after I ate it. So I had a follow-up phone appointment with the allergist, and we were discussing everything that was going on, and he diagnosed multiple chemical sensitivity. And when he did, it was a bit of a relief. But at the same time, I asked him, okay, so what do I do now about the chemical sensitivity? And he told me it's not really my area, so I don't really know what to tell you. So I was feeling like I had so much hope that he was going to provide all the answers, and suddenly I felt like I didn't know where to turn to next. But finally I had something concrete to look up. So I started going into all the research, just looking up things related to multiple chemical sensitivity, and it didn't make very pleasant reading, because mostly I was just reading that people end up living very isolated lives and they just learn how to live with the condition, and that there is no cure, and that they just learn to avoid places where there are chemicals. As I was also looking at all these websites, I came across the NRS website, and I remember just looking at what was written there, and I don't think I spent very long on the website at first because I thought it's too good to be true. I had read so much about all the gloom and doom, and suddenly there was Annie Hopper, and she was so radiant and happy and saying that it's possible to recover, and I thought it can't be that simple, with everything that had been going on. I thought it's not possible. So I actually didn't spend much time on the website at the time. But as time passed, obviously, I had to make a lot of changes in my life. By this point, I stopped going to work, so I was just trying to work from home, which usually meant I could only work around 6 or 9 hours in a week, because I just didn't have the energy for anything more. I stopped going out completely, because the last time that I tried going out, we actually tried stepping into a church, and the smells of people's perfumes and soaps, it just sort of hit me. And I mean, I used to react to the point of almost losing consciousness. So I was just shaking, and I couldn't function. So I had to just leave, and I couldn't even walk to the car. So then it had to get the car, and then we went back home, and I pretty much just I had no energy then for a few days, I suppose. And then I said, it's just not worth it. So at that point, I stopped going out completely. My contact with the outside world was just getting smaller and smaller, and my life had changed so dramatically. So I was continuing to look into, how to cope with MCS and what to do. And I kept coming across people mentioning the NRS and saying that, it's something you should try. And people were mentioning that they either knew someone who had recovered, or that they had heard that it was effective. And so at the same time, something was sort of going through my mind, and I was thinking, maybe I should give it a try. I thought I had hit rock bottom by that point, and I thought, I suppose I don't have anything to lose, just to try it. And actually, I ordered the DVDs, and I remember thinking that if I just managed to improve by 10%, then at least it's 10%. I thought nothing can be worse than how things are right now. When I eventually decided I was going to give the NRS a try, I ordered the DVDs, and I also ordered Annie Hopper's book, Wired for Healing. And before I started the DVDs, I started reading the book. And I remember thinking, as I was reading the book, I remember starting to believe and that this was it. This was what was really going to help me. The book just, everything Annie wrote just really resonated with me. And when she was describing her experience, although obviously her experience was different from mine, but at the same time I could see so many similarities, even in things she thought as it was all happening. And it just gave me a lot of confidence, and I started feeling a bit hopeful, and thinking that maybe this was the answer after all. When I saw Annie on the DVDs for the first time, when she was speaking and when she was explaining things, I really felt like she was speaking to me, because everything she was describing was everything that I had gone through and everything that I had felt, and the things which she kept repeating, especially when she kept repeating that this wasn't my fault and I didn't sort of think my way into the illness, and it wasn't something which I could just talk myself out of, or bring myself out of. Although I knew, okay, I was going to have to commit to something, it actually made it a bit easier for me, I think, especially because I still had, although I didn't have the energy of an athlete at the time, but I still had the mind of an athlete. I remember seeing in the DVDs there was one person who removed his mask on, I don't know, day 2 or day 3 of the program. And I remember for a long time, because for me, the chemical sensitivities took longer to shift. So I kept my mask, not as much of the time, but I kept it on and off for around 5 months. And I remember sometimes thinking, maybe I should have been able to get it off sooner, and thinking of this person who had, but that's obviously something you don't want to be comparing yourself to others. Everyone's journey is completely different. When I set my goals, one of my first goals was to be able to be with my loved ones again. About a month after I had started the NRS, I was able to be with my loved ones in a room again. So it was a big deal for me, because it had been a while since we could be all together inside, and I could hug them again. Another really big milestone for me was getting to be a bridesmaid at one of my best friend's weddings. Before I had started the DVDs in January, we had gone for a walk together, and I was telling her, I think you should just ask someone else to be your bridesmaid instead of me. Or I told her, I don't think I should be your bridesmaid. I told her, because at this point, I don't even know if I'll make it to the wedding. And the wedding was around 3 or 4 months after I started the NRS, and I actually got to be her bridesmaid, and I was there from start to finish, and I got to go to all the events related to the wedding. And we actually joke a bit about it, because in the end I was the last bridesmaid standing because I think it was such a big moment for me to be there that I just didn't get tired. I could keep going. And that was really special for me. Around 2 months after that, I went on my first holiday to Italy, and that was a real defining moment for me. I went with Dermot, and it was really special for us, because after everything that had happened, it was so nice to be able to relax and spend quality time together. And from my recovery point of view, it also really showed me how far I had come. It showed me that I can literally go anywhere I want now, and that I have the energy to do anything I want. And it was around that time that I started realizing that in time I would be able to eat anything I want as well. So today I can eat anything. What I was doing without the NRS, I still had a lot of anxiety around certain foods, especially the initial ones that I had eliminated. And then it was from the forum that I started reading about people who were working on food sensitivities, and it sort of got me thinking that maybe the way I was seeing progress in other aspects, then maybe I could also improve with foods. So I did start introducing foods that in the past I thought I would never reintroduce. And some of them took longer, obviously, because the ones that I had created such an association with, thinking that they were the foods that made me ill, it did take longer to work on them. But without the NRS, I know that I would never ever have considered, eating some of the things. Like I ate a pizza not too long ago, and just to be able to sit down in a restaurant and order food without calling in advance to let them know about my sensitivities and asking them a million times to make sure everything's plain and nothing's added that I can't have. By around 6 months after I started the program, I actually returned to the office. And even before then, I was able to coordinate an annual activity that we organize at work, and I actually got to be there as well. But now I work full time, I work from an office, and it's really nice to be with my colleagues again. And, I no longer live the life of avoidance and isolation that I thought I was going to have to live for the rest of my life. So I remember when I came down to goal 5, I remember thinking maybe if one day I could run a race, it would be really special. And just 6 months after starting the NRS, I ran my first race. It was a 5 kilometer race. And it just, I can't even explain how much it meant to me to think back to the times when I couldn't even get up from the sofa, and just anything was, even just washing my hair was a struggle, anything was a struggle. And to know that I was there at the start of the race and then to be at the finish line, it just really meant a lot to me. And since then, I've taken part in other races, and I actually ran a half marathon last month. The NRS is just a really great tool, and it's also helped me in other areas of my life, which I didn't think it would help with. So, for example, I've always had some issues with anxiety and perfectionistic tendencies, and procrastinating certain things, and it's really helped with that as well. So I really feel my life is just completely different from the way it was before I started. Just know that you are rewiring your brain, and that in time everything, all the goals you set will come true, but there is hard work in between. And since there are ups and downs, I remember in the beginning seeing some progress, and then maybe something would happen, or I might overdo things a bit, and some old symptoms would come up or increase, or I might feel something new. And I remember sort of thinking, oh no, maybe I shouldn't have started this, maybe it's not going to work for me. And now sort of it gave me a glimmer of hope, and now it's going to get even harder, because before I had started, I had sort of accepted that that was my life, whereas now I had this hope that my life was going to change. And but it's just important to know that the ups and downs are there, and they're normal, and everyone goes through them. But eventually you do get to the point where you recover fully, and it's just amazing to be able to have a second chance at life. And after everything that happened, and after the NRS gave me so much. So if you're skeptical, and I was so skeptical at the start, I don't think I could have been more skeptical the first time I came across the website. And just to think how different my life is now than it was before I started the NRS, I just feel so grateful that one day I just said, okay, I've hit rock bottom and I'm just going to give it a try. And if you do the same, so much is possible for you. I have my life back in more ways than I ever even dreamed could be possible. I still remember thinking back and thinking, if I could improve by 10%, maybe it's worth a try. And I'm so glad that I did give it a try, because I didn't get my life back by 10%. I got it back by around probably 500%. And I actually feel better now than I did probably before the glandular fever. So that's when I was around 12, so probably around 20 years ago. So I just feel so grateful.